Michelle. Obviously, you know what this stuff was all about, right? It's not a surprise that we showed up tonight.
Almost overnight, she went from a possible witness to a person of interest in the case of a missing mom of 5 from New Canaan.
We see state police, New Canaan police, searching downtown Hartford.
So what's that about? Why is the scene moved to Hartford?
You need to tell us what you know about Jennifer's murder and Forrest Dulles.
The girlfriend in the middle of a bitter and brutal divorce battle.
The stuff you were throwing out, we have. And it's all Jennifer. It belongs to Jennifer. Do you understand?
Turned high-profile murder investigation.
Guys, what happened to Jennifer, Michelle? You're gonna do the right thing, Michelle?
We're taking you inside the trial of Michelle Troconis.
Joining us once again for Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis, I'm Shannon Miller. We are getting you ready for a new day of testimony as the prosecution continues to make its case. Let's bring you through the very latest. Tuesday's testimony focused on this red Toyota Tacoma. It belonged to an employee of Forrest Dulles, and we know, according to arrest warrants, investigators believe the Tacoma was being driven by Forrest Dulles on the Merritt Parkway headed to New Canaan on May 24, 2019, the morning of Jennifer's presumed murder. Investigators tracked the Tacoma's movements through surveillance video at rest areas along the Merritt, some of which the defense contested was hard to make out. We also saw media images from Forrest Dulles' Farmington home at Jefferson Crossing on May 31st, when investigators served Forrest and Michelle Troconis search and seizure warrants for their DNA, fingerprints, and full-body photographs. Sergeant Michael Butin is seen here talking with Forrest and Michelle. Now, before this moment, one of the key people in the cases, one of Dulles' employees, ran into investigators and spoke with them for the first time. NBC Connecticut's Kevin Geis is live for us outside Stamford Superior Court, once again getting ready for a new day of testimony. But Kevin, let's start with that moment that we learned about Pavel Gumieni and how he first came into contact with investigators.
Right, Shannon, we learned about the first interaction that Pavel Gumieni had with state police investigators while they were serving a search warrant at 4 Jefferson Crossing, Forrest Dulles' home in Farmington. Sergeant Michael Butin was recalled back to the stand by the prosecution. He testified that detectives were outside the home on Jefferson Crossing when they saw a white Jeep Cherokee slowly approach, drive past the home, then turn around and drive toward the exit to the neighborhood before he was stopped by police. That vehicle matched the description of one of Forrest Dulles was known to own. Butin even says they thought the driver was Dulles until they got a closer look.
We did identify him as Mr. Pavel Gumieni, who was the project manager for the 4 group, so he was an employee of Mr. Dulles's.
And was Mr. Gumieni still in the Cherokee at this point?
Yes, he was.
Did you have a discussion with him about what he was doing?
I did.
Can you describe that discussion for the jury?
Yes, so I asked Mr. Gumieni where he was coming from, and he had indicated to me that he was coming from the property down in New Canaan that they were working on. So yeah, he said he was coming back from New Canaan.
Describe Mr. Gumieni's demeanor for the jury.
He appeared to me to be very nervous. I noticed that his breathing rate was elevated. He was breathing at a higher rate than you would expect someone to be, just, you know, driving in a car. I also observed the carotid artery in his neck was pulsating, indicating that his heartbeat was beating pretty fast.
Was anyone else from the state police in the immediate area as you're having this interaction with Mr. Gumieni?
Yes, Detective Fitzsimons.
Based on Mr. Gumieni's demeanor, what did you do?
I asked Mr. Gumieni if he had anything illegal in the vehicle that I should be made aware of. He related to me that he did not, and that I was free to search the car if I wanted to.
At some point, was he asked to step out of the vehicle?
Yes, he was.
Why?
Based on his appearance in terms of his rapid breathing, the elevated heart rate, and the fact that he gave me consent to search the car, at that point I was going to remove him to further investigate. So for officer safety purposes, my intent would be to pat him down to continue our dialogue further, and just kind of remove him from the vehicle to ensure that he doesn't have any weapons on him or anything that could harm myself or the other detectives who were with me at the time.
As you were patting him down, what did you notice?
I noticed that his shirt was soaked in sweat.
Did you ask Mr. Gumieni about the sweat?
I did. So as I stated earlier, Mr. Gumieni had indicated to me that he was coming up from the New Canaan area. Based on what I knew about the travel distance, that was at a minimum of an hour to 2 hours of drive time, depending on the traffic. And I had indicated to Mr. Gumieni that I thought it's suspicious that his shirt was soaked in sweat, as it was, due to the fact that he just told me he drove up from New Canaan, presumably inside of an air-conditioned vehicle. I didn't feel that his shirt would be so sweaty if he was in a car for that long in the air conditioning.
How did he respond?
He then elaborated further on his comings and goings and stated that after coming from New Canaan, he stopped down the road at a property also owned by Mr. Doulos, number 585 Deercliff, and he had indicated to me that he was removing vehicle seats from a Porsche that belonged to Fotis so that he could put them into his own truck.
Now, you may remember testimony from last week about that wrecked Porsche Cayenne that was at one of Fotis Doulos' properties. Investigators at the time noticed the two front seats were missing that Pavel Gumieni was putting in his vehicle. He did save the two seats out of the front of his Tacoma, the old seats, and later handed those over to investigators. Shannon.
Kevin, after hearing Sergeant Buten's testimony on Tuesday, again, we now know that Gumieni told Buten in that moment that he had those plans to replace the seats of his Toyota Tacoma truck with those Porsche seats. And it now appears that Gumieni could have changed out the old seats of the Toyota Tacoma after he had that interaction with detectives. Now, Buten says during that interaction on May 31st, Gumieni didn't consent to a vehicle search of the Jeep because the owner, Fotis Doulos, was not there. But Buten was able to look through the windows of that Jeep Cherokee and see what was inside.
So I noticed that there were a bunch of paper towels in the utility area. So we're talking like the back of the Jeep. Also, it appeared to be some hand tools, and I noticed that there were the seats that appeared to be vehicle seats that were lying on their side, also in the back of the car.
Now, those paper towels and tools inside the Jeep Cherokee also seen on these photos here, something that the jury has already seen. You might remember earlier testimony about the searches of all of Fotis Doulos' vehicles. They were shown photos taken of the Cherokee during that processing. Now, Sergeant Buten says after that initial meeting, he interviewed Gumieni a few days later at his home, and that is when they took the vehicle into possession.
We were instructed to seize the Jeep Cherokee that was at his residence. Based on information we had gleaned through the interview, it became known to us that it was at 80 Mountain Spring on the day Ms. Doulos disappeared.
Now, Buten says Gumieni also handed over to investigators his work laptop issued to him by Fotis Doulos. Kevin, back now to that first moment between police and Pavel Gumieni, Sergeant Buten described him as looking very nervous, sweaty, carotid artery pulsing. Investigators are trained to notice these things. Since Gumieni was granted immunity in this and he's set to be a state's witness, how important is it to the prosecution's case that he be viewed as a trustworthy and truthful person?
Right, it's critical. Well, ultimately, if he was granted immunity, he is expected to be a key witness in this entire trial. So we're expecting to hear a lot from Gumieni, ultimately as almost a person who can sort of put this entire puzzle together. So prosecutors have been working through a lot of evidence up until this point. They've heard a lot about the red Toyota Tacoma. They've heard a lot about different evidence that they pulled from Albany Avenue and other areas in New Canaan. So ultimately, the prosecutors seem to be sort of building toward Pavel Gumieni as a star witness in this case and using him as a way to sort of pull together this entire puzzle for the jury.
Well, Kevin, something our attendant viewers who have been following the trial might have noticed. We're talking about some of that evidence, including the Jeep Cherokee. The defense questioned its relevance, and the prosecution promised its relevance to the case is now coming to light, right?
Absolutely, yeah. defense has multiple times brought up sort of relevance to certain pieces of evidence that have been brought in, but prosecutors continue to sort of build this puzzle out. And ultimately, it is sort of building toward Pavel Gumeni's testimony, as well as some more testimony from state police investigators to sort of put all of this together. And prosecutors are making good on some of their promises to the court that ultimately a lot of these pieces of evidence will come up later. We'll continue to see sort of how they work through this case, and it sort of makes sense, or starting to make sense, exactly why they're sort of weaving through testimony in the way that they are.
And a meticulous task it is. Kevin, I want to come now. The jury also following along with police as they tracked the apparent movements of that red Toyota Tacoma the morning that Jennifer went missing. First, they showed this residential surveillance video from a motion-activated camera at a home across the street from Doulos' property for sale in Farmington. You can look there at the top right corner of your screen. You can see that red vehicle there. Investigators say that is a red pickup truck consistent with the Tacoma, driving off of the property at 80 Mountain Spring Road. Now, another witness called to testify was retired State Trooper Gregory LaBelle. He was tasked with looking for video of several of the vehicles involved in this investigation, including the red Toyota Tacoma. He spotted what he said was a vehicle matching the description on this footage here from a rest stop around 6:36 a.m. the morning of May 24, 2019, going southbound on the Merritt Parkway by the Fairfield rest area.
So it had the same characteristics as a Toyota Tacoma. We have a chrome rear bumper, silver chrome rear bumper, and a silver tubular running board step side, if you will.
Now, the next surveillance video we have is also on the southbound side in New Canaan, about a half hour later at 7:03, passing the New Canaan rest area on the Merritt Parkway. Then police capture what appears to be the same truck traveling northbound on the Merritt in the New Canaan area at 11:12 a.m. LeBeau testified that he noticed in the bed of the pickup truck a white square-looking object as well as a round object.
I was interested to see if I could identify what was in the back of the red pickup truck.
Oh, then the final shot that we see on the Merritt Parkway video here is what investigators believe the red Toyota Tacoma traveling northbound past Fairfield at about 11:25 a.m.
Half ago or 2 weeks ago? Okay. You're still working for New Canaan PD?
Now, the jury heard more testimony from Kelly Coughlin, the liaison police officer for New Canaan Country School, which the Doulos children attended. She reviewed video from 11 school buses to identify any of the vehicles that could have been involved, including the Toyota Tacoma. She spotted the red truck on footage from 2 of those buses near the same area where Jennifer Doulos' Chevy Suburban here was later found abandoned.
Are there particular cutouts or places to park on Lapham Road near Waveney Park?
Yes.
Are those on the side, if you're driving away from the Merritt Parkway going north, are they on the left or the right side?
Both sides.
They are both sides. Which side was this vehicle parked in?
If you were driving away from the Merritt Parkway heading north, this vehicle was on the left side.
Was it parked in a cutout?
Yes.
Now, if it was driving north on the left side, which direction was it parked in?
It was facing north.
Now, the jury watched the video, but we, the media, and those of you watching on live on the streaming website, were not able to see the view of the truck through that camera lens. The judge had instructed the pool photographers there, both still and video photographers, to not shoot video of that school bus surveillance video because there are children, minors that can be identified in this video footage. Kevin, investigators had identified, of course, several vehicles connected to Fotis Doulos, so they were particularly interested, though, in tracking the Tacoma's movements this day. And in fact, defense attorneys grilled the witness about, was there any reason why they focused in on the Toyota Tacoma rather than other vehicles connected to Fotis Doulos that day?
Right, as the investigation sort of continued, it seemed like investigators were really honing in on this red Tacoma as sort of the heart of this entire investigation. So state police detectives and troopers were tasked with finding this Tacoma through any surveillance that they possibly could. They talked about in testimony the hours and hours and hours of video footage that they had to go through. They were trying different businesses as well, trying to find this Tacoma. So we're sort of honing in exactly on the heart of prosecutors and investigators' case at the time, centering around this red Toyota Tacoma and ultimately as well its owner, Pavel Gumieni.
I thought it was important to note that the investigators testify the reason they didn't try to look for the Ford Raptor more specifically in these videos is that the Ford Raptor has a sort of infotainment center that in fact can be tracked. It's got a GPS location attached to it. So in fact, they were under the impression that the Ford Raptor was in a different town during this time frame that they say this red Toyota Tacoma was seen on the Merritt. All right, stick around for more analysis on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We will talk with Kevin about the intense media scrutiny that started right from the get-go that both of the families in this case faced, how it was brought up in the courtroom. We'll be right back.
My client was smart enough to know that something might be amiss here, so he held on to the seats. And when the police came with a warrant looking for his truck, he handed over the seats as well.
Well, he knew something was wrong. That is what the attorney for Pavel Gumieni told ABC Connecticut back on September 5th, 2019. That is the day that Michelle Troconis was arrested for a second time. Welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. We are waiting to hear exactly when Pavel Gumieni is expected to take the witness stand. I remember knocking on Gumieni's door shortly after his name first came up in all of this. And we now know that he has been granted immunity in the case. That did not come out, though, until recently. I am joined once again by my colleague, Kevin Geis in Stamford. And Kevin, I know you reached out to Lindy Orso, who is still representing Gumieni as he prepares to testify. What did he tell you?
Right, I did have a chance to reach out to Lindy Urso, and ultimately he told me that Pavel Gumieni is still under subpoena. He plans to abide by that subpoena, but he is looking forward to getting this testimony over with so he can get back to focusing on working hard and providing for his family. Shannon.
All right, kind of a short statement. You know, for a man that we've got so many questions for, Kevin, we know again that those attorneys are pretty tight-lipped, especially pending that he's still under subpoena and he's going to wait for his testimony to speak for him. We did get a new piece of physical evidence brought into the courtroom on Tuesday. It's a second cell phone of Fotis Dulos. Sergeant Butin opened an evidence bag and showed it to the jury. That second cell phone was seized around 9 p.m. on May 31st, the night before Fotis Dulos and Michelle Troconis were first arrested. That was at the Troop L State Police Barracks when Fotis and Michelle, Kevin, had decided to give over their DNA and fingerprints to investigators. Let's talk about now the intense media attention. In this case, it is crucial. It was brought up during yesterday's proceedings. During cross-examination, Attorney John Schoenhorn showed these photos here taken by a media outlet that day. That was on May 31st, before those DNA and fingerprints were taken. This is when investigators first meet with Fotis and Michelle. On the left there, you can see Fotis Dulos, Michelle Troconis there with her back facing us, and Sergeant Butin here. This was all at 4 Jefferson Crossing, Fotis Dulos' Farmington home. Now, Sergeant Butin testified that they informed the family that they would not be allowed to return to that home that night.
Based on the information that you had regarding 4 Jefferson Crossing, did you or anyone else from the state police inform Mr. Dulos, the defendant's mother and daughter, that they would not be allowed back in the home?
I can't recall who related that information specifically, but yes, that was communicated to them, that it was anticipated the search was going to be lengthy, and that they most likely would not be able to spend the night in the home.
Was there a request made for those individuals to be able to pack overnight bags?
Yes, there was.
And who, if anyone, made the decision to allow them to pack overnight bags?
Sergeant Bisson decided to accommodate their request, and they were each individually allowed to go into the house under supervision to pack clothing and hygiene items, things that they would need to spend the night somewhere.
And when you indicated under supervision, who escorted them into the home?
I did.
System at 70.
Now, Attorney John Schoenhorn also showed a photo of Michelle Troconis' mother and her daughter taken by that media outlet at that same scene. And he asked if the investigators were aware that cameras, media was present at the time. We have chosen not to show that photo because Michelle Troconis' daughter was a minor at the time.
You do know that there was media present on May 31st, 2019, when you were at Fort Jefferson Crossing.
There was media at every avenue of this case.
Kevin, media on every single corner, especially outside of that Farmington property, where eventually the families that lived there had to put up chains to make sure that the media didn't park there anymore. This is a case that has garnered local, national, international media. It was an intense atmosphere back in 2019, and it still is today. So why might Schoenhorn bring up this as he questioned Butin?
Right, it was a massive amount of media attention. It still is a massive amount of media attention, even around just the trial itself. Schoenhorn seems to be sort of moving the defense in a direction, basically pointing out that Michelle Troconis has sort of already been through the court of public opinion before she ever actually stood trial here in Stamford, Connecticut. But the prosecutors really haven't made much mention regarding their opinion about the massive amount of media attention.
All right, more to come on Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. Coming up, the concern investigators had for Michelle after one interaction that they saw between Fotis and the defendant. And welcome back to Inside the Trial of Michelle Troconis. My colleague Kevin Geis joining us once again live from Stamford Superior Court as we dig through Tuesday's testimony. Let's talk now, Kevin, about the night of May 31st, 2019. Fotis Dulos and Michelle Troconis were escorted by state police up to Troop L in Litchfield for processing. They were arrested the very next night. Now, Butin spoke about what happened at an area inside the barracks. Take a listen.
Can you describe the defendant's demeanor and what she did in your presence?
Yes, so she was seated in a chair. Her head was between her legs, head in hands, and just was rocking back and forth.
Did she do anything else in your presence?
She did.
What did she do?
At some point, she looked over at Fotis with what I would describe a stern look. And she made eye contact with him.
I would object to his characterization of someone's, what he calls, a look.
It's appropriate opinion, Judge.
Well, it's based on the perception of the witness. Overruled.
You may finish your answer, sir.
So what I would describe as a stern look, and was just shaking her head back and forth at him.
And when you shaking her head back and forth, which direction is she shaking her head?
The way you would shake your head and to answer a question non-verbally, no.
Did you also have an opportunity to view Mr. Dulos' facial expressions?
I did.
Describe his demeanor and what he did in your presence.
So when the two made eye contact, I would say he made an even sterner look back toward her.
Approximately how long did this interaction take place?
A few moments.
With her daughter, so I'm not sure.
Now, the jury heard some similar testimony earlier about the interrogation videos. During the first interview with Troconis, Detective Corey Clabby talks about what he witnessed between the couple.
And he looked at you as though you should see it because your face was down. And he gave you the most evil, long look I've ever seen when we had to break him from it.
He looked at me?
Yeah, he looked at you. And we became very concerned for your safety just based on our experience and what we do and what we witnessed and what we've learned throughout the last, several days.
The most evil look he has ever seen. That is what Detective Corey Clabby said, and that it looked as if Fotis was staring a hole into Michelle's head. So, Kevin, again, there was this safety concern for Troconis, and that's testimony from Sergeant Butin that the prosecution chose to include as they work to make their way through this case. The concern about her safety, Michelle's safety at the time, playing a role possibly in the prosecution's case, but we've yet to hear really more aspects from her defense attorney, and I would expect that this maybe could come up as some sort of a character witness, maybe potentially someone who could talk more about Fotis Dulos' demeanor and all this.
Absolutely, yeah. We continue to hear about safety, and the defense really hasn't brought up safety at this point, but prosecutors are mentioning it quite a bit, and we're sort of continuing to learn more about what investigators were thinking and sort of about Michelle Troconis' safety throughout all of her interrogations and all of her interviews going forward. We're learning a little bit more about what police investigators were thinking at the time regarding her safety.
Yeah, they even said in that interrogation video, Kevin, that they were afraid for Michelle to go home that night on May 31st, 2019 to spend the night with Fotis Dulos, but we know that she ended up spending the night at least close by to him in the hotel that they were staying at the time. Kevin, we always appreciate your insight inside the courtroom. We'll let you get back up to the courthouse to see any potential witnesses that could be coming to the stand today. That wraps up our exclusive Inside the Trial Michelle Troconis streaming special. You can watch the trial live on our streaming channels when court starts around 10 a.m. We'll have live coverage on the NBC Connecticut news starting at 4 o'clock. And be sure to join us weekdays at 9 a.m. for more in-depth analysis of the trial as it continues to unfold.